The Queen and members of the royal family bid an emotional farewell to the Duke of Edinburgh at his funeral this Saturday, 17th of April, at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. While plans for Prince Philip's funeral were modified in light of COVID-19 restrictions, the ceremonial aspects of the day and the service were still in line with the Duke's wishes, Buckingham Palace has said. Only 30 guests were attendants at the service, and this included all of Philip's children and grandchildren, plus their spouses. The children of the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, and 3 of Philip's German relatives, Bernhard, hereditary Prince of Baden, Prince Nhatz, Landgrave of Hesse, and Prince Philip of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Also invited was a close friend of Philip's, the Countess Mountbatten of Burma. Penelope Penny Knatchbull, who was previously known as Lady Rumsey and later known as Lady Brabourne, and it was the Duke's carriage driving partner. No members of the royal family were in a military uniform. The men wore mourning coats with their medals, while the women appeared in day dresses. Leading the procession to the chapel were the band of the Grenadier Guards, followed by the Major General commanding the Household Division, service chiefs, the Duke of Edinburgh's coffin on a custom-built Land Rover hearse, members of the royal family on foot, Philip's household staff, and finally a Bentley carrying the Queen. A national minute silence took place at 3 p.m. at the start of the funeral, and the Duke was entered in the royal vault in the chapel at the end of the service, which was conducted by the Dean of Windsor, David Connor. Prince Philip's funeral service saw the royal family united in their grief, and while cameras were able to film inside St. George's Chapel for the duration of the ceremony, there was one poignant moment that they chose not to record. Out of respect for the Queen and her loved ones in attendance at the service, the moment that Prince Philip's coffin was lowered into the vault below was not shown to television audiences. It allowed the heartbroken monarch a short moment of private grief as she said her final goodbye to her beloved husband of 73 years. The Duke's cap, whip, and brown gloves were laid on the seat of his favorite driving carriage as it was brought into the quadrangle. The carriage was pulled by his 2 trusty black fell ponies, Balmoral Nevis and Nutlow Storm. The Duke's coffin, accompanied by the Dean of Windsor and the Lord of Chamberlain, was moved to the state entrance of Windsor Castle by a barrier party of the Queen's Company, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. The bearer party placed the coffin into a special modified Land Rover, which Philip helped to design, to transport it to St. George's Chapel. The coffin was draped in the Duke's personal standard and with flowers, his naval cap and sword placed on top. Members of the royal family not involved in the procession waited outside the chapel, including the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Cambridge, the Countess of Wessex, Princess Beatrice and Eduardo Mapili-Mosey, Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank, and Mike and Zara Tyndall. Presenting to you a footage on the arrival of the royal family at the St. George's Chapel in Windsor. The Queen, arriving at the service, was accompanied by her lady-in-waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, in the state Bentley. The monarch was dressed in a black day coat and wore a face covering. The Duke of Edinburgh's funeral was adjusted in line with COVID-19 restrictions, including the seating plan. Ordinarily, the Queen would have been seated closely with members of her family, but the royals were socially distanced at the service inside St. George's Chapel in Windsor last Saturday. It's pictured for the first time since her grandfather-in-law's Prince Phillip said passing. Earlier this week, Prince William shared a touching tribute to the Duke, saying, "I will always be grateful that my wife had so many years to get to know my grandfather and for the kindness he showed her. I will never take for granted the special memories my children will always have of their grandpa coming to collect them in his carriage and seeing for themselves his infectious sense of adventure as well as his mischievous sense of humor." The Duchess of Cornwall was pictured leaving the funeral looking visibly emotional. Camilla and her husband Prince Charles were seen looking visibly moved a few days earlier as they visited floral tributes left by the public for the Duke of Edinburgh. The Duke of Sussex was pictured for the first time in the UK civil duties with wife Meghan in March 2020. Prince Harry joined cousin Peter Phillips and older brother Prince William in the procession. The Duchess of Sussex was advised not to travel to the UK by her doctor due to the advanced stage of her pregnancy. She and her husband Prince Harry have also provided a wreath to be laid during the service at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. Joining Princes William and Harry in the procession were Prince Charles, Princess Anne and her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, and the Earl of Snowdon. Also in the procession were 6 of the Duke of Edinburgh's staff members, including his personal protection officer, his private secretary, 2 valets, and 2 pages. No sermon was delivered during the ceremonial royal service, in keeping with Prince Philip's wishes. No members of the royal family read lessons or gave readings, and there was no eulogy. Perhaps this could be understood that this is in keeping with the Queen Mother's funeral in 2002, when the delivery of readings was left to the clergy and there was no eulogy then either. As per Prince Philip's request, there was military involvement at the service, in line with the late royal's wishes. Action stations, which is sounded on naval warships to signal all hands must go to the battle stations, was played at the end, a tradition sometimes associated with naval funerals, in honor of the Duke's active service in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. Although the funeral has ended, the nation is still in a period of national mourning, which is set to end at 8 o'clock in the morning on April 18th. The royals have opted to undertake 2 weeks of national mourning, which will end on 22nd of April.